Hey guys, it's Nick. I know I talk a lot of doom and gloom about the recession and inflation, but I actually have some good news. It seems those nasty problems have been solved, and you'll be shocked at how easy it was to solve these problems by our faithful government servants. I'll start with the first and easiest problem, the recession. In old timey economics, a recession was defined as two consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. And even Bill Clinton agreed.
Mr. President, what do you think about a recession?
Well, a recession is 2 quarters in a row of negative growth. I don't think we're going to have that.
Now, even though we just now have had two consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth, we are still not in a recession, according to Joe Biden.
Both Chairman Powell and many of the significant banking personnel and economists say we're not in a recession.
And we probably don't even need to use that word recession anymore. Let's try the new word that his press secretary is calling it.
That's why we're seeing what we're seeing is that we are in a transition. We had this strong economic growth because of the work that this president has done in the past 18 months. And now what we're seeing is a transition into stable and steady growth. But we get it. We get that people are still feeling a little bit more pain.
Well, that sounds double plus good to me. So, just to make sure we don't have any more panic and confusion in the future, the new White House definition of a recession is 436 straight quarters of at least negative 93% GDP growth. Oh, and there's a few more details. I'll let Daffy Duck explain.
Provided the accident occurs as a result of a stampede of wild elephants in your own home between 3:55 and 4 p.m. on the 4th of July during a hailstorm.
So, now that recessions are gone for good, let's tackle that pesky inflation problem. It seems we don't even have to come up with our own ideas because Panama seems to have solved the problem. Let's take a look. So, here in this article on Zero Hedge, they say to stop inflation protest, Panama fixes prices of groceries and medicine. Who knew that it was that simple? So, after weeks of increasingly intense protests, the government said that they will exert control over the prices of 72 food items, and this week agreed to impose price caps on 150 medicines. And so the cost of the basic food basket would decrease by 30%, a savings of more than $80. So, why stop there? Why not decrease the cost by 80%? So how are they going to accomplish these price controls? Well, through a combination of price caps, subsidies, tariff reductions, and limits on margins. Now, subsidies and tariff reductions could work. Limits on margins and price caps, not so much. On July 11, they capped the price of gas at $3.95 a gallon, which is 24% lower than the end of June price. But the demonstrations and roadblocks continued. And so, because of that, they cut the price of gas again just 6 days later to $3.25. So, I guess if they protest a little bit more, maybe they can get it down to 50 cents a gallon. Of course, Panama is not the first country to come up with the idea of price controls to combat inflation. Now, I will say that price controls technically do stop prices from rising. However, it also stops people from ever getting their hands on these price controlled items because of the shortages it creates. If a producer or retailer is forced to sell an item for less than it cost them, then they just stop selling it, or they sell it on the black market where supply and demand determines the real price. So yes, the price of bread is now cheaper, but you can't buy any at the stores because the bread producer loses money on every loaf, so he just stops making bread. Gas is cheaper, but nobody supplies the gas stations with any gas if they are losing money on every gallon at the new controlled prices. This is nothing new to economists and governments. You would think, though, that they would stop trying to pull this trick after they themselves caused this inflation in the first place, right? Let's look at some other plans for fighting inflation. So last year, China had to backtrack on the price caps for electricity produced by coal fired power plants because the price of coal got too expensive. But what happened was these power plants would just shut down and pretend to be under maintenance. And here they say utilities have struggled to keep up with post pandemic demand for electricity, and power plants generated less as rising price of coal rendered operations uneconomic. So they just stopped producing electricity when they could only charge a certain amount, but the coal cost them a lot more to produce this electricity than they can sell it for. But there's no lesson to be learned there because German firms call for energy price cap to avoid social unrest. So because of the reduced natural gas flows from Russia into Germany and the high price of natural gas in Germany, they're trying to put a price cap to help the average household and set an upper limit for energy costs. But the energy minister, Robert Habeck, has in the past rejected calls for state price caps, saying the state cannot fully offset increased prices and that attempting to do so would send the wrong signal about the need to conserve energy. And the winner for Crazy Idea of the Year is the U.S. idea that they can put a price cap on what Russia could sell its oil for on the world market. And so they think Russia is just going to lower their price because Biden calls them up and tells them to. Here's a very accurate comment. Those Europeans and Americans that are talking about $40 a barrel, meaning what they're going to cap Russia's price to, what they're going to get is $140 a barrel. And what that means is if they try to stop Russia from shipping their oil because it's not the price they like it, Russia will just stop shipping oil and take that oil off the market, and the price will go up a lot higher. And how do we fight the inflation that was caused by us printing money that we don't have? Well, we just print another $800 billion that we don't have and call it the Inflation Reduction Act. It's kind of like those Macy's commercials where they say, the more you spend, the more you save. Genius. Oh, and in case you thought we would never do price controls, well, it is too late because we have already done it mostly during both world wars, the Korean War, and under Nixon between 1971 and 1973. And here in this article saying, remembering Nixon's wage and price controls. On August 15th, 1971, Nixon said, I am today ordering a freeze on all prices and wages throughout the United States. And after a 90-day freeze, increases would have to be approved by a pay board and a price commission with an eye towards eventually lifting controls. Conveniently after the 1972 election. And after this announcement, the stock market rallied, the press loved it, and the people loved it too. 75% backed the plan in polls. I think this may be giving Biden some ideas. And Nobel Prize winning economist Milton Friedman predicted it would end in utter failure and that the people would pay the price, but not after he'd coasted to a landslide re-election in 1972. And here's how they summed up the outcome of these price controls. Ranchers stopped shipping their cattle to the market, farmers drowned their chickens, and consumers emptied the shelves of supermarkets. And occasionally we learn something from our mistakes. Nixon's top official, Schultz, told Nixon in 1973 that at least the debacle had convinced everybody that wage price controls are not the answer. Now, maybe wage and price controls weren't the answer back in 1973, but I'm sure it's different this time, and they will do it the correct way this time, right? Anyway, if price controls and printing more money doesn't stop inflation dead in its tracks, there is one final foolproof solution. Just change the definition of things. So from now on, this is living in an affordable house. And this is the new definition of driving a car. And this is the definition of eating a juicy, delicious steak. Problem solved. You're welcome.